You're not getting any younger, so
stop talking about that thing you want to do and just go out there and do it.
Hey you! Yes, you! Welcome to the You're Not Getting Any Younger podcast, a podcast for people who want to disrupt their lives for a good reason, to make it count. I'm your host, Jen Glantz, and every week I'll drop a new episode with stories from real people just like you, who woke up one morning and decided to make big changes, starting with small things. We'll cover topics like entrepreneurship, love, failure, and self-care. Hey, you're not getting any younger, so let's make this an adventure. Ready? Here's something that I know to be truer than true. We are all constantly chasing one thing, the desire to feel like we matter. This desire isn't always so obvious, but it's there. It piggybacks onto our briefcases, our text messages, and our hearts. All we ever want is people to make us feel seen, loved, respected, and appreciated. And maybe that's the problem with it all. We rely on other people to make us feel. Or maybe it's not a problem. It's just our expectation. And so we wait, we wonder, we dream, but we just don't do. We don't stand still, sit strong, look up toward the sky and take it all in. All that we are, all that we've done, all of the ways we matter in so many millions of ways to so many people, even though it's not always so obvious to us. Meet Hannah Brencher. She matters to me because back when I was starting my online writing career in 2010, she was already there, sharing her thoughts on her blog and starting a love letter movement that changed the world and her own loneliness at the same time. Her new book is about living like you mean it, and it's called Come Matter Here. I'm bubbling with greatness as I welcome her onto the show this week. I want to start your story off when you moved to New York City, which was a year after you graduated college, and that is a romantic dream for so many people, but sometimes once they get there and they unpack their bags and they head to their local bodega and they eyeball their first rat, they start to realize that this city has a lot more to it than they expected. So first of all, what made you make the move, and how did you feel when you finally arrived in the city?
Well, I think what made me make the move is exactly what you were just saying. It's like there is just this romanticized idea about living in New York City. You know, I probably watched The Devil Wears Prada one too many times. Thought I would work for like a fashion magazine like every other young woman that moves to New York City. And I just always knew, though, that like it was in me. It'd been in me since I was a child. And I tell anyone, like, if you feel that you need to live in New York City, like, go and do it. And it will be unlike anything you ever experience. And I still attest that, like, the city is, like, unlike any other city, you know? But reality set in very quickly that, yeah, it wasn't going to be picture perfect. It wasn't going to be a scene out of The Devil Wears Prada. I was living in the Bronx. I was living in an immigration center on the third floor. I was living attached to a church that they call the Cathedral of the Bronx that P. Diddy actually shot a music video at.
Wow.
Yeah. And it just was like reality set in very quickly, like especially having like what I would consider a dream job working for a human rights organization at the United Nations. Like even that was a reality check of like, okay, like nothing at the United Nations happens quickly. It's not instantaneous. Like everything takes a lot of time. And I guess I just didn't know at the time that like transition also takes a lot of time. You don't just show up to a city and it's yours. Like there's all the growing pains, all of the loneliness. And in my case, like it ended up being some depression.
Was this the first time that you felt depression, or was this really the first time that it was magnified when you came to New York City?
It was the first time that I felt it, and I think like was able to go to a doctor and get a diagnosis. I would definitely say, looking back, like I definitely experienced anxiety before. I'd had anxiety my whole entire life, and we just like kind of wrote it off as normal. Like, oh, she's just nervous about everything. And I'm like, well, now I look back and I'm like, that's not normal that I was nervous about like every little thing, getting on the school bus, going to school, social interactions. So yeah, that was the first time though that it was like something that I couldn't just pick myself up by my bootstraps and like move forward.
When you moved here and you suddenly felt depression sort of take over you, what were you thinking? Were you thinking, should I just pack my bags and head home? Or were you thinking, I have to stick it out? You know, that's a really two tough things hitting you at once, you know, moving to a new city and then feeling depression. So what was your sort of game plan when everything started to not go as you thought it would go?
I'm not a quitter by any means. And so I was like, if I'm going to leave, it's going to be because there's like a reason to leave, like whether that's a job offer, that's something else, a new opportunity. And so I would say like for those first like 4 or 5 months, like leaving was not an option. And then I would say like it eventually got to a point of like, ma'am, like this is heavy, like this is not going away. And that was when my mom was like, you know, like you don't need to be like, you're allowed to come home. Like, I just want you to know the option to come home is there. And so I guess my escape route was just like starting to look at other job opportunities. And that was kind of how I left New York, was to have another opportunity waiting for me.
So you stayed in New York City for quite some time. How would you describe your relationship with New York City over the years?
I love New York, but I definitely you know this, there are some people that are just lifers. Like, yep, that's their city. That's where they're meant to be. I thought I was going to be one of those people. I learned very quickly that I am not. But I still feel kind of that romanticized view of New York City. I still feel like the magic happens in New York City. I still luckily am able to like go back for work. And so I get a healthy dose of it. But I always laugh because I'm like, my favorite part about New York City is when I get to leave. Because it's just, I mean, for me, it's so loud and it's chaotic and it's subways and it's not easy to get anywhere. And it's just fun for me to see that like, when people find their city, if they're called to a city, like how it just fits them. And I'm like, I would have never thought Atlanta would fit me as a city, but it's like, it's so me as a city. It makes so much sense. And one of those things is that I just like to drive my own car. I like my own personal space, and you just don't get that in New York City.
Oh, for sure. I think that New York City breaks you down, toughens you up, does all these things to you so that when you finally leave, you're able to appreciate other places. But maybe if you didn't have that New York City experience, you'd be quite unsure where you were supposed to belong.
100%. I mean, like, New York City just it teaches you how to like put your nose down to the grindstone and like do work. Like, that's my attitude when it comes to work. It's like very no nonsense. We work until it's done. Like, we work until it's good, you know, like until it's the best that it can be. And I'm like thankful to like have had that time in New York City, to be surrounded by other people like that. Because I said in my first book, like, you don't move to New York City by accident. It's not just like this place that like you see on the map and you think, well, I'm sure the people are nice, I'm going to move there. Like, it's like, you go there with a purpose, and a lot of people go there with a dream.
For sure. And a lot of times your dreams change. One thing that happened to you almost by accident that changed your life was all of a sudden you decided to write love letters. So take us back to that time. What were your intentions when you decided to get out the paper, get out the pen, and write these love letters?
Well, it definitely wasn't part of the plan. I definitely didn't think I would be running a global love letter writing company, but really I just started writing these letters and leaving them around New York City because I was sad, and because I didn't know what to do with the sadness, and I didn't know how to express it. And the part of me that is the romantic and like believes in a great love story in New York City and like falling in love in a coffee shop, like thought it was like such this romantic idea to like leave letters around New York City, leave pieces of myself. But then when I blogged about it, and then that blog went sort of viral, and I spent the next 9 months writing 400 letters to strangers all over the world. that laid the foundation for more love letters. And at the time, I honestly like didn't want to start the organization. Like it wasn't in my big picture plan, but I kept realizing like people needed this and people wanted this. And like, I could have either killed the story and like that would have been it, or I could allow people to be a part of it and to like give them that gift. And so I chose that route and I've been doing it ever since.
It's such a crazy thing, especially a question that I have is, when you were leaving these love letters behind, were you ever anxious to let them go? Because I know this sounds crazy, but sometimes I'll leave books or unopened food or something around the city because I know other people will need it more than I do, but I always feel so weird letting it go. So did you have any anxious feelings around dropping these love letters off, leaving them on the subway? Did that ever make you feel any different way?
Well, I think that became my way of like coping, was that like it just was getting me through my days to know that I could leave these letters behind. I always felt like when I was doing it though, like I was almost doing something wrong. Like I was like nervous to leave it behind, as if like I was like leaving something like a suitcase on the subway, like, you know, like, and it was just a letter, like it was an affirmative letter, but like, I don't know, like, I think that it became, like, just this natural part of my day to, like, write something and then let it go. And then just to feel like, you know what, I think I've put something out there in the world that I'm sure is going to help somebody else.
Was there one or two particular moments when you said to yourself, okay, I have to start The World Needs More Love Letters? Was there a response to a letter or just any type of interaction where you said, I have to throw my entire self behind this?
I think it was, once the Wall Street Journal reached out to me and they were writing a story on somebody who had gotten a love letter from me, they were basically like, we're going to put you in the paper. And I'm like, okay, well, I really don't have a choice because I'm either going to make this something that's not about me, or I'm going to be writing love letters to strangers for the rest of my life, you know? And so that was one of the moments, but I do remember having this moment like with a mentor of mine at the time, like at the company that I was working at. And I said like, yeah, this is happening. And like, this is what I've been doing. And he thought it was all so amazing. And I was like, but I don't know what to do. Like, I don't think it's got anything left in it. Like, I've done the thing, you know, like, what more do I do? And he just like was so adamant about like, you can't kill the story. Like, you don't kill the story right when it's about to get to the best part. And when a mentor says something like that to you, like, you just naturally believe them, you know, you're like, I don't know what the best part is, but like, yeah, I want to see like what happens. And he's like, when you're this age, I mean, like when you're 23, like these are the things that you go after. Like you go after the crazy, foolish things. And then, you know, I think like one of my really good friends, Ronnie, I expected to call him and tell him this idea and have him be like the naysayer. Like that's almost why I called him, to like have him say like, this is a really dumb idea. Don't do this. And I remember telling him the idea and he was like, you have to do this. Like you really, like people need this. And so I really couldn't find somebody that was telling me no. And I took that as a sign of like, yeah, I need to do this.
It's so incredible. To this day, I think you've sent over 250,000 love letters. So what sort of process in your head did you have to turn this from idea to something that has helped thousands of people all over the world?
I mean, I think I just looked back on like what I had done for the last 9 months and I thought like, how can I duplicate this so that other people can be a part of it? And one of the things that I really loved is that like, it was really cool to like write a love letter to somebody who needed it. But I always loved when the person would be like, hey, my dad is going through this, or my brother is going through this. And I could write to that person that had no idea a letter was going to show up for them. And so I thought like, what would that look like if people could nominate friends and family and then like hundreds of letters could show up for them. And so I kind of just like built that framework. I bought a little P.O. box and I was like, we're just going to figure it out. And like, that was the beautiful, but the hard thing about creating more love letters, and still is to this day, is like, there are no other global love letter writing companies in the world. And we were the first one, I want to believe, apart from like Letters to Juliet, you know, but like, there's no one else out there that does the work that we do. And so in some ways that's freeing, but in other ways it's like, there's no rule book, you make it up and you don't really have somebody to look to be like, hey, like, so this is how you proceed, or this is how you grow.
For sure. I was thinking before we did this interview, I was like, I wonder when I first knew of Hannah. So thankfully, I did a quick Gmail search and I realized that I had sent you an email in 2012, which means I must have been following your journey since 2010, 2011, which is so crazy. But I think in 2015, I was inspired to do something similar. So I put a call out there on my Instagram saying, hey, if you want a love letter, I'll write you one and I'll mail you one. And I could not remember the last time I held a pen that long, which I think so many people feel. And one thing you said in your TED Talk that really hit home was when you write someone a love letter or just a letter, you are sitting there with uninterrupted time to write about them, to show your feelings about them, which is so different because the way we communicate now is completely not like that. So what kind of beauty is there in writing a handwritten note or letter?
I think it's just because we're so inundated with communication and like we talk to people like 24/7, like everyone is at our fingertips. Like if you text somebody, like chances are they are going to text you back usually within the hour. And so I think that there's something like sweet and nostalgic about writing a letter is the fact that like you sit down and you it's a piece of you. It's your scratchy handwriting, and a letter doesn't show up instantly. Like it's going to be a few days before you find out if that person got the letter, what they thought about it. And like, I don't know, like I have a few people that are like my pen pals, I guess you would call them. And it's just nice that you can like sit there and I'm sure you have noticed this too, that like when you sit and you write something, like the experience is just a lot different than if you like send a text message. And so I often longhand write things that I'm thinking or I want to say before, because I feel like different things comes out of us when we like put pen to paper.
So you've written 2 books, which we will definitely dive into, but a question for you, do you write your books on paper before you type them? What's your writing process like?
So my first book, I wrote the whole entire thing longhand, and then I typed it. And so it would be like, I'd be up at 5 a.m. I would be writing into notebooks for a few hours, and then I would go to the computer and I would just start to type it out. What's so crazy though, is that like this time around, I sat at the computer and only wrote on the computer and very rarely wrote things out. It's almost like, well, I don't know. I've never been pregnant and I've never given birth to a child, but like it feels like that. I feel like anybody that has written a book can like attest to like how you feel like the closest thing to describing it is like pregnancy, of like it felt so different the second time than the first time. And like it was a whole different method, which was kind of crazy to me. I think I always thought that I would write everything out first and then type it. But like for some reason, like the words just flew from from typing.
I love that you compared it to pregnancy. Not like I've been pregnant either, but I do feel like writing a book, a lot of people think it's easy or you just sit down and the words flow. But oh my God, it is one of the most emotional and loneliest and scariest processes that you could probably ever do. So in 2015, you published the memoir, If You Find This Letter. I remember rushing to Barnes & Noble to get it. I remember buying it, reading it, highlighting practically every word in the book. I'm not kidding. Thinking to myself, this is how you write a book. And I haven't read anything that has more heart, soul, and honesty in it. It was not even well written. It felt honestly like when you take that book with you, you're taking Hannah with you. So you've written.
Thank you.
Oh my God. I mean, I just remember sitting there nodding my head and clapping my hands saying, this is how you write a book. You've written a lot for the internet over the years, but what was it like pressing the send button on your first manuscript, sending it to the publisher for the very first time?
Gosh, I mean, I guess I was waiting for what that moment was going to feel like. And you've probably felt the same thing. It's like you finish and then you like kind of look around and you're like, is that it? Like, is it done? Is it over? Like, it's a very weird, vulnerable feeling. And I think that that's like what I always try to be mindful of when people put books out into the world. It's like let's honor the process that it took to get that book into reality, because we love to worship the finished product. But like, there were so many hours in the war room, like dealing with yourself, your insecurities, your words, your thoughts, your editing, all of it. And so it's like, I just have so much respect for anyone that writes a book. But yeah, I think what I remember most about that night, like sending in that manuscript, I like remember I took a shower, like got ready. My boyfriend at the time picked me up. We like went to this restaurant, and I don't even remember any of the things that we really talked about because I don't think he knew or felt the gravity of like, hey, I just finished a book, you know, like I just sent in my first book. But I just remember sitting there in that restaurant and this like kind of quiet feeling inside of me to be like, that wasn't the craziest thing in the world to believe in yourself and to believe that you could do that thing because like you did it, you're standing on the other side of it. And it just was like, I don't know, I just felt really proud in that moment.
Oh, for sure. I think that moment is one of the scariest because throughout the writing process, you think you've gotten out every single emotion you have. But then I remember like when I submitted my book, I just remember being hysterically crying. And it was weird because I was like, wow, there's still emotion left in you after this whole process.
Oh my gosh, yes. It's like, it's the craziest thing. Like people have to write a book to understand what it feels like, you know?
Definitely.
You can't put it into adequate words. Like the thoughts, the feelings, how you feel like you're just like living in this alternate universe and everything around you is like inspiring you.
Oh, for sure. And I love how you say that you should honor people for the process and not necessarily for the end result, because sometimes the end result is the loneliest moment for the author. Do you remember how you felt the day your first book came out? You saw it, you held it, you kissed it. Do you remember how you were feeling then?
Well, I remember that I met up with you the night before.
Yes.
And I was like, they had brought me to New York City to like do a talk show, and I knew that I had a book reading and all this stuff. But honestly, like I was in the thick of a pretty severe depression during that time. And so like, I remember waking up and I remember crying and I remember being like, this isn't how I thought it was going to feel. Because at that time, like, mental health and just getting better, like was the only thing on my mind. Was I just want to come out of this. Like, I just want to know I'm going to be okay. And so like the victory for that day, like didn't even feel like the book. It felt like breathing. It felt like, okay, I'm here and I'm doing this and I'm showing up and I'm doing thing after thing after thing, where like 3 months earlier, like to complete one task throughout any given day was like very hard for me. And so I think I have a very, like, I keep telling my friends, I'm like, it feels like this is my first book in a lot of ways, because I really didn't have the mental capacity to really fully launch a book the first time around.
Definitely. And I think, you know, the process of waiting for the book to come out, all of the stress that goes into marketing it. People don't realize that as an author, your job is to do more than just write the book. You know, you're responsible for pushing it out there, doing interviews, you know, selling the book. It's like you're taking on a second job. So and it's crazy. People don't realize that. But did anything about the book coming out and the stress and the nerves of that, do you think added to your depression?
Oh, 100%. I feel like something would have broke me, like, to begin with. Like, something would have eventually broke, but it was 100% the book that, like the straw that broke the camel's back, because I think I had a lot of expectation on the book without realizing it. And it wasn't even like, I wasn't like expecting it to be like this big bestseller or any of that. I just expected that the book would change something inside of me, and that maybe when the book came out, like I would no longer be depressed. I would no longer be sad. I would feel like I had like a sense of purpose almost. And I had good friends that were like, no, the book's not going to give you that. Like, that you're not going to find it there. But I like don't think I fully believed them until like my brain just was like, we can't do this anymore, and like shut down. And I really think that was what got me into that depression, was placing so much expectation on something that like it was never meant to hold that sort of expectation.
For sure. And you know, I think it's people might be listening to this thinking, what? You have a book come out. What could you possibly be sad about? But there are so many layers that you don't understand, you don't see, unless you know the person and you know what they're going through. And that's the crazy thing with depression, is that sometimes you can hide it and sometimes you can't. And some people know what's going on, and others just view your life on Instagram and think it's wonderful. What advice do you have for people who are going through depression but are having to show up and are having to get through, crazy things in their life or at their job or with businesses that they've started?
I think the advice is just kind of simple, and I have to tell myself that on a daily basis, is that you show up and you do the best that you can, and you just that has to be the biggest victory at the end of the day, is that you didn't accept defeat. And even now that's I really put mental health as a huge priority in my life. That's the most important thing for me. I still have days where I feel really sad or where I feel really anxious. And yesterday was one of them. And it was okay, what are the things that I can do that are around me that I can get done in the next 5 minutes, and you have to still show up and do the best you can. But I also say find your people and talk to your people and let them know hey, I'm struggling, or hey, I'm going through this, because our first instinct might to be share it on the internet, but it's walk through it with your people. I'm incredibly mindful of I won't share about a low point or something that's been going on or this and that unless I found the resolve or I found kind of the golden ticket to the moment, because otherwise I'm I don't need however many thousand people knowing that I'm in a really depressed spot or knowing that I'm really anxious. And so it's I deal with it with my people. And once I feel I have that teachable moment, then I share.
For sure. And I think that's so important because sometimes people, especially with social media, feel the opposite. They just share, and then they get a ton of people giving advice, a ton of tips.
Yeah,
none of that's working.
A ton of noise.
Yeah, and that makes it even harder. And I'm a very secretive person. I mean, you could look at me and think you have no clue what's going on in my head. You have no clue what's going on in my life. I'm so secretive, but yet people will look at social media and think they know you. You've put out a lot of your heart and soul on social media through your blog, through Instagram, through social media, your Facebook group. What has it been like to share so much of your life with people who were strangers that also sort of become your friends?
I think I've learned and refined it over time, but I think I was saying yesterday to somebody, vulnerability has always been my gift. I know that it's my gift, and it's what draws people to the writing. And so it's I'm just very mindful to share things that are vulnerable, but I don't actively I very rarely share what I'm in the thick of, what I'm in the throes of, just because I feel there's a time and place for that. And I feel a lot of people that just put all of their mess out on social media end up regretting it or end up having too much noise, and they're not able to really have a clear path of thinking. And then you've got all these people worrying about you that are not even in your life and not even in your story, and it's I don't know. I think I have to take it day by day, because sometimes without even realizing it, I can carry a tone of sadness or a tone of this or that based on how I'm feeling. And so I really try to not let my feelings dictate the way that I write. But even if I am kind of having a really crappy day, a lot of times I'll be sharing the good, because I just I get the whole let's be real on social media thing, but I'm we don't really want each other's real. We just want to know the details to each other's story. And what do you do when you have those details? What purpose does that even serve except being in the know? And so I keep my real stuff for my closest people, and it's a group of 2 to 3 people. It's not very many. And so I laugh a lot when people are you're so vulnerable, because I'm yes, to an extent, but I'm vulnerable with the things I've already dealt with and I've come out of. And if I'm actively in the thick of it, chances are it's something oh, right now I feel I'm comparing myself to a lot of people, but it's not some big boulder that really you're going to walk away being oh, Hannah's really, really in the dumps. That stuff stays very quiet. It stays very private. I just don't think the place for it is on the internet. And the thing is, when you start telling those stories become a part of you. I became the girl that was depressed and left love letters as a way to get out of that depression. And that was who I was for a while. And I've had to work really hard to not let that be the main story, because that's a story that happened to me when I was 22 years old. Like I don't want to be 65 years old and still talking about that thing that happened when I was 22. And so I'm just very careful about like being mindful of the narrative that I'm putting out there to the world.
For sure. If people still ask me about Bridesmaid for Hire when I'm 65, I'm going to go crazy,
Right? Because like even sometimes now I'm sure you're like, oh gosh, like I'm the wedding expert. And like it's beautiful and it serves a purpose, but like it's not everything.
Oh, for sure. I mean, there's so many other parts of you that you want people to ask you about, and instead people are like, tell me you're crazy as this or this, and it's like that's not my 9 to 5 every day. That's not what my thoughts are every day. So I completely get that. After your first book came out, you started posting very openly about your mental health, and what impact did that have on people around you just by you coming out speaking about it?
I think it just allowed people to feel like, okay, like I'm not alone in this. Like I'm not the only one. And I just don't think I ever thought that I don't think I thought I would be an advocate for mental health until I walked through that severe depression in 2014. Because I really honestly thought depression was something you dealt with and then it was done. It was over with. I thought it was like the chicken pox. Once you have it, it never comes back. Yep. And so to find out that like, this is my day-to-day challenge. Like this is the battle that I will probably face for my lifetime. Like, I don't know, it gives me a lot of hope in order to inspire and encourage people, because I'm also very much like a proactive action steps, do the thing type person. And so I'm like, okay, well, if I'm going to have depression, like I am going to do the things that I have to do in order to be at least the healthiest that I can possibly be. And I think that that's like allows me to stand from a point to say like, hey, like every journey is different, but like these are the things that have definitely worked for me.
That's awesome. And it's so great that you are aware and you also take the time to build your life around making sure that you're feeling healthy, you're feeling great. And I think a lot of people sometimes don't do that or sometimes avoid that. So that's awesome. Your second book comes out on May 29th and is available everywhere. I like to say everywhere because it's obviously on Amazon, probably Barnes & Noble, all the fun places. It's called Come Matter Here. I have a copy of it sitting in Florida at my parents' house. I haven't picked it up yet, but my mom got her hands on it, was so impressed, called me up and was like, do you know this person? Because this is the most magical and amazing book. And I was like, Mom, you have to read her first one because that's also amazing. So if my mom likes it, that's guaranteed that it's going to impress everyone. I promise you.
Oh my gosh, I love that.
She's a tough critic and she adored it. So first of all, what does the phrase "come matter here" mean?
Well, so the story behind like that phrase "come matter here," because it's like most people are like, wait, come matter here? Like, what do you mean? So I like that. I like that it's more of an ambiguous title. It kind of demands an explanation. But so it was a conversation that I was having with one of my good friends, Blake. At the time, he wasn't a good friend, though. I didn't really even know him. It was one of our first conversations. And I just remember like every answer that he was giving me, like to the questions I was asking him, felt very, very polished, felt very rehearsed. And so at one point in the conversation, I just stopped him and I said like, okay, like, tell me something real. Like, tell me something that like maybe a lot of people don't know about you. And he said to me, he was like, I wake up every single day wondering if any of this matters. And he was like, I go to sleep by the light of my phone, checking at likes and retweets and places where I've mattered throughout a day. And he was like, but it never really fills me. And he was like, I knew all day that you and I were going to meet up. And so I waited all day to get that text, get up, get dressed, and go matter somewhere. And he said, I feel like I'm almost always waiting on a text from someone that says, come matter here.
Wow.
And that hit me hard because I was like, oh my gosh, yes, I know that story. I've lived that story. I think every one of us at some point has wanted to know, like, does my life matter? Like, do I matter? Does it matter that I'm here? If I wasn't here, would people even notice? And like, I think a lot of times we're just waiting for that invitation. And what I've learned throughout the last few years is that it's like, we have to stop waiting on that invitation to come matter somewhere because it's already here in the present, here and now. And if we don't show up for the present moment, we miss the invitation altogether.
That is amazing and such a powerful line that gives me chills because it's so true. And I think with your first book, it was very relatable. What about this book do you think is going to pull people in and make them understand the story?
Well, I feel like with my first book, like it was very much memoir. And this one, like I got to pull off from memoir and still have like a loose chronological order to the stories I was telling, but like really got to dive deep into some themes. And so I just like, I love that because the book is way more about like the themes of like leaving and going and falling in love and, you know, beating the lies and all these things rather than the story is about a girl and everything that she's been through. And so like, that's been exciting for me, like to see the people that have their hands on it already, like the launch team, like that different things are jumping out to different people. Like I had one girl be like, yeah, like I read chapter 5 and I had to walk away for 36 hours and like deal with it. And like, you know, I get texts from my friends being like, this chapter here is like hitting me really hard. And so I wrote the book in the hopes that it would be the kind of book that you could pick up and you could flip to chapter 7 and you could just start reading there and you wouldn't feel like you were missing out on anything, you know? And so that was really what was so fun for me about that, writing that book was like, not feeling pinned down to a certain style of writing, but just feel like, okay, like, well, if this chapter is on community, I'm going to write all the things that I currently know about community at this time in my life. And the writing came out much easier, if I'm being honest, like just having those themes as like a guidepost.
Yeah. Yeah, the best piece of advice I got was from my best friend Ray, who's 86 years old. He told me when I wrote my book, write out of order. You know, if you want to write chapter 25 today, write it. And I think that's might have what helped you is just that you didn't have to write in some type of order that tied everything in. You can say, today's love day, let's write about that. So I'm sure that helped you a ton.
Exactly. 100%.
What type of emotions did you have walking into writing your second book? Because I know I'm currently dealing with so much negative self-talk thinking about writing the next book. So what was your emotional state like walking into this book?
I was lucky that I kind of got a break. Like I had enough distance between book 1 to book 2 to really feel like, wow, I've grown up, I've changed. I no longer have these big expectations that I'm going to place on a book. And all that I knew more than anything was that I loved the process of writing the book. And that's what I was showing up for. I wasn't showing up for the finished product. And like, I still feel that way today. It's like, I'm just hungry to start writing the next one because when I'm writing a book, I am 100% in my element. I am like the best human that I possibly can be. And so, yeah, it's like, I think that I had a really healthy approach to it. And I would wake up every single morning at 5 a.m. and I would sit there, I would do my studying, I would cover it in prayer. And then I would write for 3 or 4 hours and then I would walk away for the rest of the day. It was very much a hands-off approach. And I want to do that like forever. I never want to go back to like the all day, every day. This is how I feel like a book needs to be written.
I'm laughing because that was my process. And while I loved it, I always say my experience writing a book was that I felt like I blacked out. Like like labor, I'm guessing you don't remember the process. Like if you ask me now, I'd say, yeah, it was great. But I remember in the thick of the process, like banging on my computer thinking, I want this to be done, but I also love it at the same time. So I get that it's a bit of an emotional struggle, and it seems like this time around you were smarter in how you used your time to figure out, okay, just a couple hours a day, give it your all and walk away. What excites you the most a couple of days before your book comes out, thinking about its release?
I have no idea. Oh my gosh. I know I should have this answer. And I'm like, I don't know. Because, it's like you release a book and then you're like, oh, shoot, we still need groceries. So I'm going to go to the grocery store. Like in a lot of ways, it feels like I've already really let this book go. And so I guess I'm just excited for people to have it and for people to be able to share it with other people that need the message. And like, for it to no longer be like this suspense hanging in the balance. Like it's no longer like preparing for the arrival. It's like, well, it's here. And so like, yeah, I guess I'm just excited for it to just be here.
Is there anything that keeps you up at night when you think about the release of this book?
No, not a thing. Like It's magical. I very much am very hands off about it. Like it's going to be what it's going to be. It's going to help who it's going to help. And I don't control that miracle. And so I'm trying to get myself into the headspace of just like, and now I'm meant to enjoy and celebrate. Like that's what I'm meant to do. Like celebrate all the beautiful things that come from this, because otherwise, like, I will be eaten up inside by the lies of like, am I doing enough? Have I pushed enough? Am I marketing? Am I this? And am I that? I'm like, I don't want to market or promote. I just want to share what's happening and how it's blessing people.
Which I think is so smart. And I remember when my book came out a while ago, last year, you wrote to me saying, just enjoy these moments.
Right, yep.
Don't crowd your head with the pressure, the stress, just enjoy it. And I really appreciated that because it is a huge milestone. Yet sometimes as an author and a human being, you don't feel proud of yourself. So I hope you do a million special things for yourself between now and next week and really just, enjoy the moment. I want to do a quick lightning fire round with you. I'm going to ask you a couple questions and feel free to answer however you would like.
Okay, let's do it.
Awesome. When you were a kid, what did you want to grow up to become?
A writer.
What is your dream job now?
A writer.
That's okay. That's awesome. It's a great dream job.
Well, my grandmother literally was like, when I was sick, she's like, you're going to be a writer. That's what you're going to be. And I wanted to do anything that I could to like make her proud and prove her right. And like, she'd be so proud right now.
Oh my goodness. She'd probably buy 50 copies of the book and hand them out.
She would.
Oh man. What advice would you give yourself at age 22 graduating from college?
You don't need to have a 5-year plan. Like, have some goals and like write them down and like dream big, like still be a dreamer. But like, oftentimes the things that are going to happen in the next 5 years that you say yes to are going to be the things that like you just are not expecting at all.
I love it. What advice do you wish you can give yourself right now today that you would actually listen to?
Let it go. I don't know, like just like let it go and just be in the moment and enjoy it. Like I can get like nervous about the dumbest stuff and it's like just be in the moment. Life is too short.
I love it. Best advice anybody has ever given you?
Gosh, best advice anyone has ever given me. That's a really good question. I think one of my favorite pieces of advice, simple as it is, like just came from my dad. And it was like when I was flying back to Atlanta in the middle of like really kind of going through that depression, starting to recover from it. And he just was like, don't take things so seriously. And so, yeah, because it's my dad and my dad is a person of very few words, that meant a lot to me.
And it's so true. I wish I remembered that every moment of the day.
Yep.
What's the number one thing you feel an urgent desire to accomplish this year?
I'm going to write another book this year.
Yes.
I've made the goal now that I'm going to write a book every single year for the foreseeable future.
Oh my goodness. I'm so happy because now I'll have more things to read that I like. Yeah. Keep them coming.
So I'm like, I should just start like now and then I can say I started writing another book before this one even came out.
People, you know what? A lot of the best advice I've been given from authors is the second you're done with one of them, keep going to the next.
Keep going.
Yeah.
Yep, that's so true.
Do you have a moment of failure that you want to tell us about that you went through and you kept just pushing forward?
That's a great question. These are great questions. I think that I think I talked about it, I touched on it briefly and I just wrote about it for the first time 2 weeks ago. But I think that the failure for me was to place such high expectations on that first book as if it was going to change my life. And it did change my life. I will say that. But I kind of looked at that as if it was my golden ticket, anything that you look at and you just think this thing is going to fix me and it's going to heal me, oftentimes won't do that. And so I think that I look at that and it was a failure for a long time and I was ashamed to even admit it. And now I'm just embracing it and speaking about it because I'm I think it's important. I think we've all probably been there before.
Amen to that. My final question for you is fill in the blank. You're not getting any younger, so
stop talking about that thing you want to do and just go out there and do it.
Yes, thank you so much, Hannah. Please tell the listeners where they can find out more about you and your new book.
So you can find me at anything Hannah Brencher, hannahbrencher.com. All my social media handles are Hannah Brencher. And to get all the goodies for the book, just go to comematterhere.com or check out Come Matter Here, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, wherever great books are sold.
Hannah, thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm wishing you the most luck and love in this world. I will always be your biggest cheerleader. Thank you so much again for coming on the show.
Thank you. It's been so fun.
Oh, thank you, Hannah. You're amazing. This was such a wonderful interview. I can't thank you enough. Hey, you. Thank you for listening to the You're Not Getting Any Younger podcast. There are hundreds of thousands of pods out there, so thank you for listening to this one. You can find the show notes for this week's episode up on our website, anyyounger.com. Subscribe, rate, and review the You're Not Getting Any Younger podcast on iTunes so that other ears around the world can listen too. Oh, and join our secret You're Not Getting Any Younger Facebook group, where over 1,000 people are talking about how to disrupt their lives, for good reason, to make it count. Until next week, all my love, Jen Glantz.